All right. We are going to read more of Story Thieves. We are starting on chapter 7. Bethany took the book from Owen at the marked page, then began to push it with one hand, holding the other out to him. Owen took her hand and then, as soon as her head went inside, grabbed the baseball bat he'd left on the bedroom floor. There was no way he was going to face down Dr. Variety without some kind of weapon. The guy had beaten Keel Nomenfoot like 5 times already and had all the power of science on his side. The least Owen needed was a bat, a metal bat. It was perfect. Now armed, Owen took a deep breath and followed Bethany in. This time they went slower into the book, and he could feel his fingers, then his arm melting into words. Then those words pouring out over the page like brownie batter. When his head went through, though it was more like stepping through a bubble. First, he was in his bedroom, and then a tingle, and there he was standing in the upside down tower of the Magister. The Magister's study could have stepped right out of Owen's imagination if rooms could step. Every wall had bookcases, and every bookcase overflowed with books, almost all of which held spells or potion recipes, or a million other things that Owen would have given almost anything to read. Potions bubbled over small flames in various places, and dark shadows snapped and bit at the metal bars of their cages. Keel, winged cat, Alphonse, Alphonse sat cleaning himself on a table, ignoring them. And the Magister himself stood staring into nothing, his mind communicating by magic with his apprentice beyond the end of the universe. Owen knew that above them, where the upside down tower met the underside of the cliff, thousands of magical traps awaited any unauthorized visitor. He also knew that at this very moment, Dr. Variety was working his way through them without a sweat. They only had a few minutes before the mad scientist showed up, which meant Owen needed to be in place, and that meant giving Bethany something to do. Spellbook, Owen whispered, nodding toward the center of the room, where a monstrously huge book lay open on a pedestal. In the Kill Nomenfoot books, you learn a spell by reading it, but can only cast it once without the spell book. Then you have to relearn it. So don't cast the search spell by accident. You'll only get one shot. Does it have a table of contents or something? Bethany whispered, her eyes widening at the size of the book. How am I supposed to find the right spell? Owen shrugged. In the books, the spell book always opens up to whatever spell Keel needs most. Maybe just try thinking hard. Bethany nodded and slowly approached the book, trying not to make any noise. Not that the Magister would hear her, as intent on his magic as he was. That was the only way Dr. Variety had been able to surprise him. But not anymore. Owen shuddered at how amazing this was going to be. I'm going to keep watch, he told Bethany, then backed away into the shadows next to the door, giving himself a clear view of anyone who came in, as well as of Bethany and the Magister. He pulled the bat from behind his back and held it ready. Too bad he couldn't use it some kind of magic on Dr. Variety. But the doctor would expect that. Baseball bats, though, not so much. Bethany reached a hand out to the spell book, but before she could touch it, the book leaped to life, pages turning on their own, making Bethany gasp and step back in surprise. The book came to an abrupt stop, and she glanced down at the page. Immediately a warm glow spread from the book to Bethany's hands, and she leaped backward. What was that? She whispered to Owen, her eyes still on the spell book. That's how it works, Owen whispered. It's teaching you the spell. That's what the glow was. Was it the location spell? She shook her head. Amnesty of amnesia, she read, for removing memory. The glow began to light her up, and she quickly stepped backward again. Why would it give you that? Owen said, starting to worry. Bethany needed to be done before Dr. Variety got here, or the doctor would see her. The last thing they needed was a spell book that couldn't do its job. Bethany glanced at him, and he quickly shoved the bat behind his back. Uh, who knows? She said, sounding almost guilty. But I don't remember the words to the spell, so I guess I didn't give it enough time. Doesn't matter. Let me try one more time to find the location spell. She put her hands on her forehead and stared at the spell book, apparently trying to make it turn to the spell she wanted. The book complied, flipping its pages to a new spell near the beginning, and Bethany glanced down at it, then gave Owen a thumbs up. She must have found it, because this time, as the book began to glow, Bethany laid her hands on the page and allowed the light to slowly sweep up her arms and into her body. It's like hot chocolate on a cold day, she said, a tiny smile on her face. The light quickly faded and she turned back toward him. That was almost nice. Great, Owen told her nervously, looking at the door, where he could swear he heard explosions getting closer. You sure you have it? Like I said, all spells are one-time things if you don't have the spell book. So let's make sure before we go. Bethany closed her eyes. I think so. I can remember the words. They're all here in my head. Her eyes opened and she held out a hand toward Owen. Come on, let's get out of here. This is much easier than I thought it'd be. Owen bit his lips, then shook his head. Hold on. Just let me take this in for one more minute, okay? Since it's my only chance to ever see it. Bethany looked like she wanted to protest, but instead nodded. Just don't take too long, she said, when then went to hide from view behind the magister's desk, waiting for Owen. Perfect, because Dr. Variety ought to be coming through the door any. The door exploded out into the study, knocking Owen against the wall hard. Hello, Dr. Variety shouted, glowing with a light of his force field, and from the large green ray gun in his hand. Sebastian, I rang the bell upstairs, but you must not have heard me, so I destroyed most of your tower instead. From across the room and just out of Dr. Variety's sight, Bethany's eyes went wide with terror, and she frantically motioned for Owen to stay still. She had no idea what was happening, that the Magister sensed Dr. Variety was there, that Keel was telling the Magister to save himself, but the Magister refused to stop his spell so the information about the seventh key would not be lost. If you're busy, I can come back later, Dr. Variety said, then shot his green gun directly at the Magister's giant spell book, which first exploded, then imploded immediately after. He stepped forward, aiming the gun at the Magister's back. Or we could just take care of things right now, once and for all, my old friend. Dr. Variety's force field protected him from magic, fire, lasers, and a million other things. But one thing it didn't protect him from was solid objects, especially metallic ones. For some reason, the force field energy got disrupted by metal, which wasn't a big problem when your enemies all used ray guns or magic. Of course, the doctor always had other protection as well. But here, after making his way through the entire tower, all he had left was his force field, and Owen knew it, since the book had been pretty explicit about that fact. Owen hefted his metal bat and took his baseball stance, just a little just like Little League. Bethany's mouth dropped open and she shook her head over and over. Owen just smiled. Goodbye, Sebastian, Dr. Variety said, and his gun began powering up to fire. Hello, Dr. Variety, Owen said, then swung his bat right at the doctor. The bat hit the mad scientist with a hollow metallic thunk, and the evil doctor actually spun around once before collapsing to the floor, hitting his head hard. The force field powered down with a whine, leaving just an old man in a lab coat lying on the floor of the magician's study. For a moment there was silence, as Bethany was too shocked to even move. That moment quickly passed, though, and she stood up. What did you do? She asked in a tiny voice. Owen, what did you do? I saved the Magister, he told her, raising the bat in the air like a sword. Bethany, I just saved the Magister. Do you know what this means? He shouted in triumph, then turned his gaze toward the ceiling and addressed his audience. Hey, everybody reading this book. Don't worry, the Magister doesn't have to die now. I saved him. He's going to be okay. You're welcome. Okay, you guys, that's the end of this chapter.